Anyway, Baxter County Judge Mickey Pendergrass has joined us here on one of the other microphones. And before we get to the judge, I want to remind folks that starting Monday, the Paul Harrell program will be from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. Monday through Friday. That'll be on in Jonesboro, Fort Smith, Rogers, Russellville, and Stuttgart. So 6 to 8 a.m. And they will be adding, let me get the other note here real quick. They will be coming to the 96.5 The Answer family in the Little Rock market. So Little Rock gets to hear the Paul Harrell program from 6 to 8 a.m. every Monday through Friday as part of the Conduit News Radio Network with Paul Harrell. Mickey Pendergrass, Baxter County Judge. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon.
And so how you been?
I've been good. It's been busy days starting a new year and excited about the prospects going just like everybody else across the state. Looking forward for all the happenings that are going to happen in 2018. We all got a cold start. I was talking to somebody in Little Rock earlier this morning, just before noon, that, and asked how the temperature was down there. When he told me it was 16 when they started this morning, I said, "Well, you had a heat wave." So y'all down there in southern part of the state know it was 5 or 6 degrees here this morning with a little wind chill. So. In northern Arkansas, we're kind of froze up, but we're transferring business like normal. We find things to do.
Well, you've been a former Republican leader in several aspects, and I wanted to focus this week on Come Together. In fact, there was a song 40 years ago, Come Together. So what we've been through during the Obama administration, and this is my personal opinion, but I feel that administration was so divisive, socially, racially, religiously, politically, and I've seen a lot of tensions throughout society in during that period of time. How do we come together?
Well, we changed the conversation from what can I find on you to being partisan politics to talk about issues and about what we intend to do in this position or that position, and we talk about our differences between the two. If my ideas are better than yours and you like my ideas better, then vote for me. If my opponent's ideas are more in line with what you think they are and you think's best for the community, the state, the nation, whatever avenue you're in, then vote for the opponent. We've got to have that discussion return back to the issues and the program that we have laid out of what we like to see happen, and get away from the partisan because I'm a D or an R or an L or a G, whatever I intend to be. We need to bring that conversation back to that. And on a much smaller scale than you see on the national or state level, I experienced some of that in some of my races locally, where they make it a D and an R thing instead. Well, let's talk about what we could do better here. And you hear some of that, but we end up trying to dig up dirt and talk bad about the other person. And that's if there's something out there that's borderline criminal, maybe then we need to talk about it. But other than that, it's an exchange of ideas that we need to, and somewhere in the middle there is where we come up with what's best for the state. And that's why it takes as I learned, thinking that I was very inadequate, once I got elected to this position, I take count of what I have just accomplished. Now what am I going to do about it? I've got to produce what I said I did, and have I overstepped my abilities, or have I gone beyond my... It's turned out to be very well because I surround myself with good staff, which is highly important. But that's where we need to be, is talking about how can we better the situation, and that's where the conversation needs to stay. We've been in the gutter, and politics has been steadily going that way in my lifetime. And it becomes so partisan, divide on issues. I get so disgusted with what's happening in Washington because we may circle the wagons depending on which side of the aisle you're on and defend our position instead of debating what's best for me and you out here in America and all across this land. We're fighting about where my ideas are better than yours. Well, there's common ground there somewhere, and that's where we need to be. Ideas and what is your idea that is it better than mine?
Okay, we were just on with Jan Morgan. I gave her my idea. I just gave it out for half of Arkansas here that's tuned in, the debit card nickel. Okay, it may work and it may not. So it's a different idea, because I'm saying that with the amount of tourism that comes in, Razorback football, ASU football, the racetrack at Hot Springs, the people that come in to camp, to use the resorts, that go down to Hot Springs to be on the lakes, Norfolk, Bull Shoals, wherever you're at in Arkansas, the tourists that come in and spend money in the summertime pay that nickel too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, will it work or not? Is it a viable idea? And I think, Jan heard that, the governor's heard it. I've talked to several people in the Republican Party about this, and it may work here, but it may not. Well, can we look at it? Is it a viable idea? Somebody else may have a better idea than mine. If so, I'm going to salute and say, go for it. But have we done things in a way for so many years that we're just stuck in the mud?
Let me give you a little example. And I did a search, and I encourage anybody out there after this interview we just had, just put Arkansas news in your Google tonight, this afternoon, and see what it comes up with. But one of the things I noticed here in the headlines from Central Arkansas, all military retirement income tax cut to go into effect in January. That started yesterday. Let me give you a little history. I don't expect a pat on the back, because idea wasn't original with me, but I suggested this to Asa Hutchison before the primary election when he was in Baxter County campaigning, and I got some audience with him, and I suggested to him, because of our large veteran retirement population in Baxter County, I said, would you look at exempting pensions from Arkansas income tax? These people are very valuable members of our community and all across our state, that if you looked at this, and he said, well, that's a good idea, and that's about all he said, and it's something worth considering. Well, guess what?
It got passed.
They considered it in Little Rock. The word got around, they brought it up, and they did it. Now, I don't really like the way that they accomplished that, because they tied other things to it. I'm a kind of a stand on your own type guy, but at least we got that part done, even though they tied other people that I know that Paul and Jan and me them moan about all the time that I've heard, and I don't disagree with that. It should have stood on its own, but we got that through because it was a good idea that somebody suggested to me and talked about it, and I considered it. I suggested it to the next to be governor, and then it got into the legislature and it got passed. And so beginning yesterday, that is an exemption, and I agree to that point that I think we ought to work towards exempting and doing away with all income tax in the state of Arkansas, but you've got to replace the revenue somehow or another to some degree. So but that's the way an idea can get started. And at the time, I didn't really appreciate his answer, but because somebody put the bug in his ear, and that's the way ideas get started. And a lot of things happen in the legislature and the governors from the same.
So you were pushing the wagon up the hill, and by the time it got to the crest, it rolled down, and just happened to be that idea that
you think about what year that was. That was 4 years ago.
What?
It was in 2014 when we were both campaigning for office. I for re-election, him for the governor's seat against Mike Ross, and he had a primary opponent that you mentioned a while ago for Curtis Coleman, and I attended the rallies for both of them as sitting county judge. I thought I need to be in contact with whoever the governor is, and I think that's an important contact for all of us as county judges, and they appreciate and look to us for advice as well, because we're down here with the people. But that's how ideas get started, because somebody's out there with the people that can bring these things up. And a lot of things go through the legislature that starts out that way.
Well, let's talk about...
But that's what we ought to be talking about.
The way the taxes are handled. You are a sitting current county judge. You see the numbers on a daily, monthly, weekly basis. Tell the people in Arkansas what you see in Baxter County. It may not be 100% identical to Pulaski or Faulkner or Craighead or Greene or Washington County. How does the tax base work in Arkansas? You see it as a county judge.
Yeah, well, Baxter County is in kind of a unique position. We're probably the 24th, 25th largest, somewhere between 20 and 25th largest county in the state. We're a Class 4 county. There's like 7 or 8 of us. It's in this population from 40 to 50,000. And we have the lowest real estate tax of any county in that number. And matter of fact, of all the counties except 2. As far as what the revenue is for the county. But what we depend on a lot in return, because of the state sales tax being increased, is this county general turnback, which comes from the income and the revenue developed in the state, and it's worth over $1 million a year to our budget. We also have county road turnback that comes. It's over $1 million of our revenue where our revenue for our road and bridge millage in Baxter County, it's 2.7, brings in about $1.05 million a year. You add on top of that about 1.4 of the county turnback from the state. It's shared funds. Then we get enough revenue from those sources that we have about a $3.5 million budget, which is still too small to take care of the infrastructure we're in charge of, but it's what we have to work with. That's how we get funded there. County General is funded by the 0.8 real estate millage that we collect in Baxter County, brings in about $450,000. Now we have a $14 million budget. Of that, which about little over $8 million of that is County General. So how do you fund an $8 million budget with $450,000? It's because we have about $3.6 to $4 million in growing sales tax revenue, which brings in a total of close to $7 million a year we share with all the cities. The cities get just over 22% of our sales tax we share with all incorporated cities. That's the way the law was written when counties were allowed to pass a sales tax. And so then we get County General turnback and other revenues that come from the state that are shared with us so that we can float this $8 million budget and pay 165 employees, maintain a jail, maintain a sheriff's department, and then separate funding for the road and bridge, the juvenile department, the emergency services at 911, which you pay for, and a fee on your cell phone as well as your landline. Those are fees that support that system. But even that in itself is a real problem that counties are struggling with. That 911 is supposed to be completely funded by phone bill fees. And the 65 cents was put on the cell phones a few years ago to help us there, but that was divided up amongst the counties where the small county got the lion's share of it. We get $12,000 a year for that to run a $500,000 budget. So we fund 911 departments $250,000 just out of our, between $250,000 and $300,000 just out of our county general funds that we have to add to that to keep we have a state-of-the-art 911 system. But that's kind of in a nutshell the way we fund our county, and we get a lot of revenue returned to us from the state.
Hold that thought. I want to talk more about this, visiting with Baxter County Judge Mickey Pendergrass. The Paul Harrell program from Mountain Home, Arkansas. Time for a quick break, and we will be right back after this break. And we're back live with the Paul Harrell program. Dale Hoffman filling in for Paul Harrell, coming to you from the XL7 television studios in Mountain Home, Arkansas. We're out here on Commerce Drive, and big news for the Paul Harrell program coming up on Monday, January 8th. The show will be The Paul Harrell program will be changing its name and expanding to the Little Rock Market. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell from 6 to 8 a.m. Monday through Friday. Paul will be joining the 96.5 family in The Answer in Little Rock. And so our friends in Little Rock, Arkansas will be able to enjoy the Paul Harrell program from 6 to 8 a.m. every morning. He'll be on in Jonesboro, Fort Smith, Rogers, Russellville, and Stuttgart. In the studio with me today is Baxter County Judge Mickey Pendergrass. We're talking a little bit about the tax stream and how you get these taxes. And so we've got about a little under 6 minutes before we go to the next break. So tourism dollars, how do they filter into the economy of each county?
Basically, they come through the sales tax revenue.
How much sales tax do you get?
The county right now gets 1%, which is we get, I think the figure is 57.2% comes to the county. The rest goes to the cities. So we have a 1% sales tax in the county. The cities all have at least 1%. A couple of the cities in the county have 2%. So there's the dollar growth, and this is true with the 6.5% or so that goes to the state. The growth that we see in revenue goes up when we have an increase in tourism dollars because they spend money here. If you look at the city of Mountain Home has another tax on hotel spaces, and it grows to promote the area and to push different things. It's got a name through the chamber and a board that oversees it. But the growth in that also is something that they can use to advertise and promote the area, to bring them into the lakes and the rivers and the things, even the baseball tournaments that you've talked a lot about. And the other things that goes on here, they use that money to promote the area and do those things. So that's how we measure a lot, is the occupancy rate as reported by the resorts, the hotels, and the restaurants, as well as the growth in sales tax, and that helps the state because the state gets a lot more of it than we do. But Baxter County is kind of unique too, that kind of blurs that picture because we have become a destination county for the surrounding area. We have the shopping here that's nowhere close to us, within 100 to 120 miles. And so it brings people. If there was a study done a few years ago by the economic development part of the Chamber of Commerce, and the Baxter County draws in about 116% or better overall of its population. And so that kind of distorts that figure. When you go to some counties below around us, they're below 70%. So that is also an indication that they're spending their tax dollars here, which helps us be a little more progressive in our sales tax. It's amazing that we do, but that's how you measure most of it.
When we shop local at Christmas, a week ago we're celebrating Christmas, and of course it's January 2nd, but when that Black Friday hits and we're online, or we run to Springfield, we're on to Tulsa, some go to Memphis or even St. Louis, what's it take away from Jonesboro, Paragould, Mountain Home, Fort Smith, Little Rock, Fayetteville? I mean, the bigger cities. I mean, you go to Fayetteville, and I was over there on the 18th, and just business after business after. If you took away 1% of that, how's that hurt?
Well, it hurts a tremendous amount, and on top of that, you have the online sales, which we are not collecting at this time, which is, it's more and more the purchasing is going to online, and you may or may not pay sales tax on it. So that is hurting us as much as traveling away now. It appears our sales tax numbers may appear that they're staying more and more here. We don't get, those numbers are almost 2 months behind before you get them. The numbers we just had in December was from October, and they were up. They were good. So they were more than last year and the year before that. So that's an indication of what Black Friday is going to this month. When we get about the third week of the month, we'll get November's numbers, which will have that in it. And so that'll be a good telltale sign. But they do run almost 2 months lag time. But the combination of the travel and the better the infrastructure, the better the traveler or family, and the online purchases that sales tax is not paid on, it hurts us considerably. We run a very tight budget to run all the operations we do in the county, just like the state, because of the revenue that's available to us that we are not capturing. And it's a disadvantage to our brick and mortar stores that we have here. We want to support them. You would expect me as a local official, and I agree with this personally, that you shop local as much as possible.
A lot of criticism over the tax that was passed on Amazon that should have been, they said was collectible, but it just hadn't been, I mean, the send button hadn't been hit, so to speak. But we just went through a tax initiative in Baxter County, and I'm running short on time. We've got to go to break here in a minute. Without the taxes, you can't pay the firemen, you can't pay the policemen. You know, you can't pay your people when it snows 8 inches out here. When we had the ice storm, I don't pay the people to come out here and clean the sidewalks and clean the streets and to take care of the car wreck or to put the fire out. You know, and I know we've got a lot of volunteer fire departments here, but we have a very large and a very well-operated fire department in Mountain Home. If you were to cut their budget by 15%, you wouldn't have these services.
And that's a problem with what, I had scribbled a note here earlier, but that's the problem with what we have some expect. We're a low-income state, and we're a low-populated state, and this was suggested to me by a businessman locally, and I tend to agree with it. Even though we're a low-income state, low-salary state, low-population state, those people still expect us to have the same infrastructure as the high-tax states, and the high-populated states, but we don't have the funds to do so. That's why the Highway Department in Arkansas has such a trouble time, and we and our own road and bridge department in each county has that trouble because they expect the same. When they go somewhere else, they expect us to have the same things, and we don't have the revenue to take care of it.
No. You know, people don't like new taxes like me. I wish we had no taxes, but how do we pay for the stuff we have to have if we don't have the taxes to do it? New ideas.
But I'd rather pay it locally and not have to send it to Washington, D.C. I think everybody listening to us would agree with that. So that would help us a lot if we could capture some more of that.
So when we come back, we'll talk about something else on the county basis and how this works. North Arkansas is different than Central Arkansas, you know.
A lot of it is, yes, because we have a lot things to deal with, they don't.
Well, when you
and
take
vice
the
versa.
Arkansas Highway Department and you figure they have just in Baxter County over 600 lane miles to clear, you think, oh, well, just from here to Gassville, 6 miles, and they can clear that in New York minute. No, they got to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It turns out to 24 miles worth of clearing.
Yes, that's true. Plus, they have the same size crew they had in 1960.
Yep. Time for a break. Be right back. More with the Paul Harrell program after this. Still 7 Television Studios in Mount Martin on Commerce Drive. Visiting with County Judge Mickey Pendergrass. I want to remind everybody that, let me get my glasses on so I can read it correctly. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is coming to 96.5, The Answer for your morning drive, starting Monday, January 8th from 6 to 8 a.m. every Monday through Friday. Join the intersection of conservative ideas and realty for the latest Arkansas news and politics, in-depth analysis that cuts through the headlines and learn what Arkansas politicians are doing in your name. There'll be Conduit News and Paul Harrell on 96.5 The Answer, Monday through Friday, 6 to 8 a.m. And the basic news release is Conduit Media Group's flagship conservative talk show. The Paul Harrell program will be changing its name and expanding to the Little Rock market. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell will be airing in Central Arkansas on 96.5 The Answer on Monday, January 8th, that you just heard me talk about. They'll be on also in Jonesboro, Fort Smith, Rogers, Russellville, and Stuttgart. Talking about, we'll go back to this tax issue. Nobody likes taxes, but go back to the internet tax. I don't know, the parent company of the Paul Harrell program is against all new taxes like anything else. We need to cut. How can we cut expenses from state government?
Well, that's a really good question because
you heard me talk to Jan Morgan. When you've got the head football coach is listed as a state employee.
Yeah, look at his state salary, though. Most of that comes from the booster clubs, etc. But
the TV revenues.
Yes.
Then why is he listed as why isn't he hired?
Because he works for the university. He is a state employee. You have a lot of departments. Now, I will brag a little bit. You know, they've
okay. I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. Okay, my boy attended University of Arkansas.
Probably won't find an argument.
Okay, tuition, school loans. I can send my kids to public school, which is still
majority of real estate pays for.
But yet you go to University of Arkansas and they list, it's a state-supported school.
Yes.
But you pay hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yes.
And then you've got these professors and you've got all of these administrators making hundreds of millions of dollars, and you pay the football coach and the basketball coach millions of dollars. But, well, not only part of this comes from the state, but they're really paid by over, then take them off the tax books or the state books. They're a state employee, but they're hired by the University of Arkansas. I mean, you see where I'm at with this?
Yeah,
if I can send to public schools and it doesn't cost me a dime, is the funding different for universities? How do they get their money from the state as compared to the public school?
Well, the problem with cutting the taxes, and I heard her say that, I've heard her say it before, and I've heard a lot of other people say it. But the problem with cutting taxes, I'm sitting here as a county judge, and you're going to tell me you're going to cut my turnback funds. No, you need to find somewhere else to cut it. Okay, we'll cut higher ed. No, you're going to find somewhere else to cut it. So you're going to have that pushback from everything that the state is funded, and that's the issues they have, because there are people that depend upon those fundings, and whatever the entity is, that you're going to have a hard time. That's the difficult thing the legislature and the governor's office and all has to deal with, because if you go to threaten to cut this or to cut that, then you're getting personal with me. And if it affects something that I'm doing, I could very easily, for an example, the highway department and the cities and the counties all share a portion of what is called a severance tax, which is on the discovery and production of natural gas here in the state. Well, when the prices came down on natural gas, the production stopped, and we lost a ton of revenue. That affected the highway department, affected the cities and the counties. It was growing like, we got a windfall here. We can make use of this to improve our roads. Well, it's pittance what it was before. That affects us, and affects our ability to lay more asphalt or to buy a new piece of equipment, etc. So that's
you
the
have
problem
to pay
now.
for it when
That's
you
correct.
have to buy the materials to put it on the street to
That's
begin with.
correct.
And I don't think people realize you have to pay for it before you use it.
And
that truck is not free either.
And we usually get a better deal than the general public does because we bid it out because we use a quantity of it or produce it ourselves, just like the crushed rock. But that's the problem you have in Cut It is you get so much pushback, and it doesn't matter which area of the state budget you go to. What Governor Hutchinson has done, and I think the cuts over 20% in employee force, is combined a lot of agencies that were doing redundant same jobs, and that needs to continue. And I encourage them to continue. And you see that there are still departments that could use some of that. And I like the way that direction is going, and it could go farther. But you do remember that what's it been about 5 years ago when we had someone running for public office, or I guess it's been 7 years ago, that if they got elected, they would make the state checkbook available online. That you can look up every expense and the salary of every employee for state government and what department they work for.
That was Mark Gar.
Yeah, and he got it done. It's available.
Within his first week in office, he cut his office expense by 16%.
Those are the kind of things you can talk about and do that because it's our money.
Mm-hmm.
I do this similar. I remember I spoke to a third or fourth grade group about 3 years ago, and if you want to find out what the real questions are, take questions from third and fourth graders.
What would they ask you?
Well, the last question come up that was asked. Well, I asked two. This was prior to the last presidential election, prior to the primaries when I was speaking. Who are you going to vote for president? And that was a loaded question, which I did not answer. The next question, the last question was, well, how much money do you make? And some of the teachers said, no, you can't ask that. So no, you got this wrong. He can ask that, or she, whichever the student was, can ask that question. I'm a public employee, and I can tell you and show you exactly what you're paying me to do this job and everybody that works for me. That is public information, and that's what happened with the state. But people have the mindset, that's none of their business. Well, I'm sorry, it is. I took this job, and it's public information.
Well, if you watch the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, probably coming out within the next 4 or 5 days, every state employee salary, with the exception, I think they don't list UAMS. Some of that is not listed. But it will start off, and they'll have the football coach in Arkansas, and just all the way down the line. It'll be 3 or 4 pages of printed material.
One of the things and this is what happens when you cut budget sometimes. As an example, the University of Arkansas cut the Farmers Extension Service budget. This was about 3 years ago, so they were not funding in the county. In every county, there's a Farmers Extension agent. And they stopped funding one of the positions in the county, and they instructed their agent to go to the counties and ask the counties to fund it. Well, that's like kind of beating your head against the wall.
Yeah.
We are, by law, we are required to provide for them a building, a place to have an office, and we pay for the cost of the telephone, utilities, etc. And now you're wanting us to pay for one of your employees. Well, that came down from the state as a dictate to us, and every county. And I said, you're barking up the wrong tree here. The county does not have the money. We can't afford to give our own current people a raise, much less bring on another position. We have worked with the budget enough to we start giving raises again, like we promised them we would when we hired them. But because we have got so far behind the cost of labor these days, it's hard to get good employees, which, as Jan Morgan was talking about, that's hard anyway, especially on service the end of business, because those people are getting extremely hard to find. And but if you cut a budget, this directly affects the city or the county where that office sits. Is it the 4-H person that was in there? Is it somebody with the master gardeners? Is it somebody that has to do with advising the farmers and the producers out there? That's a cost that was cut, and they expected the counties to take up the cost of it, and the majority of us did not because we couldn't afford to. That's something that we have to look at, but that's what happens when you start cutting money at the state budget. And you're going to cost something. There's just like
there was talk about eliminating the lieutenant governor's position.
Yes,
but then what's that going to alleviate? $100,000 a year? I don't even know what the secretary.
Yeah, against the budget, it's not a lot because they have cut it pretty drastically, and it's actually a part-time position.
Yeah.
To be there, and then by constitutional amendment, they changed even some of the duties therefore on that office recently in recent elections. But There are some things that definitely looked at, but I think the inclusion that is going on, has been going on for the last 2 or 3 years especially, of combining officers that are doing the same job.
Well,
and not filling positions as they go away. If somebody retires or goes away, that's what they're looking at, and that's time. That's a process of time that it takes. I may have, for one of my departments, 45 approved positions, but I save enough money in that if I can get by with 42, I've saved those 3 salaries so that I can support the ones I have working. But if I have a need, I can go pick up those other 3 people. And if it's possible, you could do things like that with a larger department. And that's what the state's doing to some degree. But the state is involved in so many different things. It's not me. You need to cut somebody else's. And I hear that all the time because I didn't fix your road. I had to make a difficult choice to fix a road because that's all the money I had. So we had to, based upon criteria, we had to choose which road we're doing now. It wasn't your road. I'm sorry. We'll get to you the next time.
The majority of county judges, with the exception of your urban areas of Jonesboro, Little Rock, Conway.
Absolutely.
The Paul Harrell program from Mountain Home, Arkansas, XL7 TV studios. Dale Hoffman filling in for Paul Harrell with County Judge Mickey Pendergrass from Baxter County. Time for a quick break. More with the judge right after this. Be right back. And we're back with the Paul Harrell program. Dale Hoffman filling in for Paul Harrell. He's on vacation.
Good for him.
At the XL7 television studios.
I hope he went to the Caribbean. Be tough sleighing with a reindeer.
Well, let's talk more about taxes. Nobody likes taxes in the parent company Paul Harrell program. Of course, they don't like the new taxes either. They don't like the internet tax. I don't either. It don't bother me because I'm never on Amazon. I'm a mom and pop shopper. I bought 2 gifts online. And here's the deal. Mm-hmm. One of my boys wanted, for people that don't know, I collect old records, tapes, and what have you. So does my boy. He wanted a particular Otis Redding from the 60s album. No problem. Try to find an Otis Redding album in Mountain Home. We have Flashbacks in Mountain Home that has thousands and thousands of selections of vintage vinyl. Couldn't find one. I had to go online, eBay.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing I bought. So out of all of my Christmas shopping, $60 was online. Everything else was either at Sears or, you got Walmart. You can't really avoid Walmart, but...
Oh, yes, you can.
How?
You can try. I do. I know. That doesn't speak for my whole family, but yes. I experienced that recently. I have an old truck that has a small part, and if you buy it locally, you have to buy the whole radiator. But online, I can find the part I need.
Really?
When you get in older vehicles, that...
What were you hunting?
Drain cock for a 94 Ford. Blew it out, and they don't have it available to them through the local parts stores. But you can search it on the internet and blow up. There it is. Huh. But there are things like that. The only disagreement I have with this, and they're probably going to take issue with me and kick me off here when I say this, but the argument has been made on the internet sales tax that it's a new tax, and that's not true. And I give you this as an example. Last week, as you know, county judges sign every affidavit that pays the bills has to go through the county judge, and the county clerk have to sign off on it. And I was brought an affidavit that was prepared by my office and signed by the clerk and prepared to pay the sales tax on internet purchases that the county made for the whole year. There are things that we get into this, and it wasn't that large, it wasn't that big a bill in the grand scheme of things, but we are required by law to pay that bill. All public entities that buy anything online that didn't pay sales tax at the point of purchase have to submit this program.
How long y'all been doing that?
Forever. As long as I know of. Now, DFNA tells us we had moved it to where we could do it annually. This year, 2018, since we are in 2018 now, I have to keep banging my head and reminding myself of that. But that's all right. I got a radio face. I can get away with that. But we will have to submit that quarterly. So we have to keep up with the invoices and research through that. And there are certain departments that buy more than others. But I'm thinking the total bill probably it was less than $400 or $500 for the whole year. But we are required by law to submit that every year, or we will be tagged legislative audit goes through our records. They look at our invoices and our affidavits, and anything that comes from a provider like Amazon or Online Staples or whatever gets flagged, and they check it. Have you submitted sales tax for it? So we have to have that in our record, and we get written up. Plus, Amazon volunteered to pay the tax. They were not required by state to do that. It was in discussion. They see the handwriting on the wall. They volunteered to do it. But that is also a misnomer. Not everything you buy through Amazon has sales tax paid on it. If it is Amazon's product, you will pay sales tax at the point of purchase. If it is something they're selling for somebody else, you will not be paying sales tax. Check your bill if you order on there. So they're submitting it. But it is a law that we as buyers, when we go online, are supposed to be submitting the invoices and paying that tax on items. When I was in business years ago, I bought stuff from out of state. And one thing that really concerned me, I did not have a sales tax number, so I paid sales tax at the point of purchase, wholesale product. I did not upcharge on products. I charged on the jobs as a home improvement business. The concern was brought up to me, what if that vendor is not submitting that sales tax that you're paying to DFNA in Arkansas? How do you prove that? I don't know, outside just straight up asking them. But guess who they're going to come after if they don't submit it back to Arkansas? You? Yes. I'm the one that made the purchase. And small businesses all over the state have to deal with that because there are times...
you were buying supplies that you were basically...
From Florida or Texas.
For resale, stuff you can get here.
Correct.
And you paid sales tax in that state.
Correct. But it was Arkansas sales tax based upon location. DFNA, and I've been through this with them and got to know some of those people, and they're very helpful with the information. They prepare a sheet based upon your address on what sales tax you should pay. That is sent out to all of the businesses out of state, and they prepare that sheet and so they'll know if I live, even though I have a 72653 area code, I don't pay City of Mountain Home sales tax. If I order online, I'm paying it because I'm 8 miles out of town. So they bill it on by address, and they provide that list to any vendor anywhere in the country that asks for it. As you know, we got hammered in November on our sales tax revenue because somebody had been double paying. They went back 3 years and refunded them their double payment, and the total cost was $539,000 that was deducted from our sales tax revenue. So they're holding the hammer. They can do that. And City Mountain Home got a double hammer because they got the total $539 plus their share of our $539. But those things are available. They provide for it. And he told me something like 1,800 different vendors that they send this list to by address. By a 911 address or by the locator GPS address, so that they'll charge the correct tax. And that's what they're supposed to be charging. If they're not, then you need to call them on it, because those lists are available at DFNA and they can get it anytime they want to.
Real quick before we take the 29 break here, the president's tax cut bill. You want to talk about that when we come back?
We can. What little I know about it.
Yeah, I haven't read it either.
I haven't checked my paycheck yet.
Real quick, the Paul Harrell program moves to Monday, 6 a.m. It's going to be a great opportunity to hear Paul Harrell on 96.5 The Answer in Little Rock from 6 to 8 a.m. He'll be on in Jonesboro, Fort Smith, Rogers, Russellville, and Stuttgart. Dale Hoffman filling in for Paul Harrell while he's on vacation this week. And you're in the studios of XL7 Television on Commerce Drive in Mountain Home. I'm here with Mickey Pendergrass, the county judge of Baxter County. And let's see, it looks like it's about time for a break. So more with the Paul Harrell program from Mountain Home right after this. And we're back live with the Paul Harrell program. Dale Hoffman sitting in for Paul Harrell while he's on vacation. We're at the XL7 Television Studios in Mountain Home, Arkansas. Here with Baxter County Judge Mickey Pendergrass. We've been talking about everything from taxes to everything else. And I wish that we could just wipe the taxes off the book and just do something different.
Yeah, that would be really nice.
It would be. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the president's. I'm going to get another bottle of water here.
But we'd have to, I don't know what kind of roads and bridges we'd be driving on or how we'd afford the schools. So
we'd still be pulling fire trucks with horse and buggy?
Yeah.
The president's tax cut. What do you think?
Well, I read different things, and I'm not an economist or a tax specialist person. I just know that there is the partisan ideas that goes with it, pro and con, that just doesn't help at all the conversation. I agree with Speaker Ryan, what he said, and I think that's where the proof will be when we start getting our paychecks this month. That's where we'll see the difference. And it's going to be hard to tell because in my paycheck, we had an increase in healthcare cost, our insurance policy, because even though mine's paid for, I purchased it through that group for my wife, and we had an increased cost there. And plus, I purchased some other life insurance policies, so it's going to be hard to figure where the cut is. But I think that it's going to affect where I really expect it, and I think where the president is correct is, and a lot of the opposition to this tax bill are anti-business in my mind. As my wife and I owned a corporation, she's still operating it to this day. And you go to pay your IRS tax bill every year, and we would always be late and getting, extensions and all this. And when you sit down to finally write the check of how much we owe, and I think, if we owe that much taxes, where's the money that we're paying the taxes on? We were putting it back into the business, and we weren't realizing it into cash, and we were just living like the poor folks we'd always been. We didn't know that, but how come if it's going to help small businesses like that, it's going to be a boon for the economy, which has been growing the last 3 quarters, as the news is well broadcast. But so I think if it gives people like that a break, any $2,000 would make a lot of difference in a small business. And if that's the kind of boon that it's going to give us, then I think that would be really wonderful. And so that's what I'm looking for, and we'll see if this holds true. Making it simplified for the common people of us. I hear that the people that get to do a short form when you have a business, you can't do that, so you have to use all your write-offs. But if it is a postage card size tax claim, filing your taxes, that in itself is a big improvement.
That sure is.
So I think it'll do if you put what a lot of the people, the liberals, don't understand is if you put the money back into the hands of the people that earned it, or into the producers and the business people that took a chance and went in
the foundation of your
they're going to spend it. So those of us out here in local government are going to reap some benefits from it because they're going to spend that money.
Well, I remember a long time ago, the elder President Bush gave a tax break to yacht builders. Or no, was it, how was it? It was
something like it. I remember that.
You remember? And I remember somebody saying, well, there he goes, cutting it for the rich. No, wait a minute. If you're paying all this tax on the yachts, that means the guys that build them aren't working. And by eliminating this tax, these guys can work. I think it was up in Maine or New Jersey or off the one somewhere up in the New England coastline. But the bottom line is the jobs were hurting because the taxes on the boats were so heavy that they weren't building the boats that were needed. So that tax was cut. They went back to work. You're talking about the economy. If this is correct, and I'll load this one more time to make sure, Dow Jones Industrial closed at 24,824.01, up 104.79.
Wow.
Now,
I don't know what that means, but that's good.
They jumped another
somebody's
100.
making some money, and I don't know how long this can hold out. I hear a lot of prognosers say there's going to be a correction, and I tend to think maybe there probably needs to be. But where's it going to go? And with the unemployment down it is, and how are we keeping inflation down? Those are things that the economists have to answer and they have to look for. But the growth in the revenue for government entities like this one is going to come from putting the money back in people's hands. If you've got more people working, you've got more tax revenue. It'll easily replace that deficit. And I think that's one thing they're going to have to. By Constitution, the state of Arkansas and all the counties in the state of Arkansas have to have a balanced budget every year. You cannot spend more money than you have. That needs to be true in the United States of America as well as the states like Arkansas that have that same constitutional requirement. We'd be a lot better off. Now,
the problem I have with Arkansas taxes right now, take for instance, I've got an 02 Chrysler vehicle out here. If somebody walked up and said, I'll give you $5,000 cash money for that right now, you get your stuff out, I want to drive it home, we change the title over, they pay tax on that. It's got 201,000 miles. It had sales tax paid on it when it was bought new by the original owner. When I bought it for $6,500, I paid tax on it again, plus the title transfer fee, plus I have to register with my county to pay taxes for owning it after I paid taxes for buying it. Then I have to pay the title fee of $11, and I buy the tag for $27. Now, if he kept, whoever bought it today, sold it Saturday for the same amount of money, it'd go through the same process.
Yes.
Now, what's wrong with that picture? That's
what's wrong with it is the county's not getting any of that money. We're limited to $25. That's all we can get off of that. If it was to support your local government, it might be more beneficial. No, they have got this, and this is true.
And in Arkansas, if you own a cow,
yes,
a horse,
yes,
you pay a tax.
There is a lot of people that don't realize that. When I recently, first of last year, sold 2 horses. I've got 2 tractors.
And you pay tax on them.
I pay personal property tax on every one of them. And so when a farmer goes in, you take a local business, if they have an inventory, and I went through this for 10 years, my business, my wife still goes through it. You got inventory, your computers, your desk, and all the office furniture in there, and you get assessed a personal property tax on that at a local level. So as revenue. So when you have a constant moving inventory, it's hard to figure that. So you have to pick it out or somehow or another a day or an average or something. But yeah, you pay taxes on all the cows and the horses and the boats and the tractors and the equipment such as that. Yes. Mm-hmm. And
so doesn't that hurt the state? I mean, hurt the people?
Well, it's not. It's not collected that way in a lot of states. May not have that, but if you look at their real estate taxes, I've had people say they move here from Chicago, and a normal-sized, medium-sized, small family house, they were paying over $6,000 a year real estate tax. They come to Arkansas, and that same house was $600 or $650 a year.
Yeah.
So it depends on where you go.
Yeah.
And there are those high tax states where personal property is. You may not pay income tax in a state like Texas, but what's your property tax or what is the other taxes? Yeah. And there's a way they're going to get around to it. And there's got to be a simpler way, you'd think, to do it. And I think we'll get there eventually if the right people.
I was one of my best friends lived at Maryville, Illinois. I grew up in southern Illinois, outside of St. Louis, in St. Clair County. Nice community where I was at in Fairview Heights, and talking with my friend by telephone about a year or so ago, he says, "What do you think the taxes on that house you lived in Illinois were?" So I wouldn't know where to guess. He says, "It's going to cost you almost $10,000 a year." I said, "What?" I said, that's a lot of money. He says, "Yeah." I said, "My dad bought the house for like $8,000 in 1961.
Mm-hmm.
What my dad purchased the house for, the price in 1961, by now, by say 2014, 15, 16, the taxes per year was as high as the purchase price in that house in 1961. A house was built in 1947. It was a 3-bedroom, full basement, detached on a nice lot.
There's ways that different states have of generating the same revenue, and higher populated states, they generate a lot more revenue because of the way that do that. Real estate tax wise, we're a low cost state. If we could find a way to maneuver out of the income tax here, I think that would make us very much competitive. And I think there's a lot of people and a lot of forests going that direction. Where it's in the legislature, the sitting governor, the challenging candidates. I think that's where we got to go eventually. And one of the bigger problems in Arkansas as well is there's a lot of startup entrepreneurs that start up business in Arkansas. We have some right here locally. But if they turn around and try to sell that business, once they get very successful, they pay through the nose for what the tax cost is for upcharge on selling that. So they simply relocate their business to another state like Texas and sell it and keep all the money. So there are things like that that certainly need to be looked at in Arkansas.
Yeah, I think Arkansas could be a leader in tax reform rather than where we are right now. And I'm sure there's new ideas being generated. It's just it takes a while to implement.
Just remember the people that are hollering about cutting taxes, which amenity are you getting right now that you want to lose? Because taxes collected, if it's a double overcharge, if it's two agencies doing the same thing, that needs to be done. But when you drop revenue, you're going to lose a cost, and you know that the State Highway Department is telling us now how far behind they are in being able to keep up with the highway systems because of the lane miles and the interstate miles and keeping them up. So there's something in there, and I'm not going to say the governor's office doesn't really have a lot to say about that. That's the Highway Commission and the Highway Department.
That's another thing.
Yes.
The commissioner, and I studied this, this was changed somewhere about 1990, 1992, or 1994. The commissioner answers to the state legislative body. How many times has that changed in the last 20, 25 years? So he does not answer to the lieutenant governor or the secretary of state. They have to answer to
the executive director answers to the commission. It's a multiple board commission.
I said, why can't he report to the lieutenant governor? Let the lieutenant governor be over the highways.
Well, I don't know. There's a discussion that they're constantly having, but I think the way it is constitutionally formed right now, the Highway Commission is totally responsible for that, and they have people in place just like I have people in place to take care of that for you and have to report back to you and get things approved or not to move on. But the Highway Commission is in charge of that and the allocating of their funds. What they're looking to the state for is how do we get more revenue, and there's a lot of things thrown out there and nothing has taken hold yet, and the Highway Department may wait to come with any plan they heard. The last thing I saw to 2020, there may not be anything, because right now it appears that the big move among the businesses in Arkansas is tort reform, which is something else that needs to be done here. Yeah. And I think that's probably going to be on the ballot this year. So the Highway Commission is trying to weigh those. They'll probably come back in 2020 with some kind of funding mechanism. What they come up with their Highway Commission studies and all the things they're working on, we'll see what that is. The good thing about that is they're including all of us as counties and all of the cities of sharing that revenue growth, because we need it as bad as they do. And people don't realize when they travel down a county road that there's a lot of state money that comes back to us as turnback funds or as shared funds. We have this half-cent sales tax that Baxter County voted against, the largest voting against in the state, but we receive close to $500,000 a year now for road construction that we dedicate towards that issue. It's going to sunset in 2023. That's going to be a part of the plan. It'll come back, I'm sure. But there are a lot of things out there. So what are we going to cut and what are we not going to do anymore?
Yeah. Finish the discussion after the break. More of the Paul Harrell program from Mountain Home, Arkansas, right after this. And we're back live with the Paul Harrell program. Dale Hoffman in Mountain Home, Arkansas, at the XL7 television studios on Commerce Drive, filling in for Paul while he's on vacation. Baxter County Judge Mickey Pendergrass. You know, if we didn't need fire, police, and all this protection, we could just do away with government. You know,
I could retire.
You could retire. Yeah. You know, we talk about limited government, and I think sometimes, I remember in the 60s, we don't have enough time to get into that, but how the government has taken over Ozark National Scenic Riverways. I always loved to go to Big Springs and Van Buren, Missouri, just off of Highway 60. And Ozark National Scenic Riverways is the perfect example of government overreach. The state of Missouri gave the Department of the Interior Jacks Fork River, the 11 Point, the Current River, and there were several little parks. They were state parks, and they were perfect. You could camp along the Current River, you could walk the paths, and you could play in the playground. When the federal government took over, it was barricade, can't do this, can't do this, can't do this, can't hang a lantern here, can't do that, can't walk on the grass, can't park here, that's a perfect example of governmental overreach.
Yeah, and they sometimes they forget who the government is. Mm-hmm. Who it belongs to, and that we can't use these because they know better than we on how to take care of it. There's nobody that knows better how to take care of the wildlife except those who hunt them. Mm-hmm. And those who understand that if they don't have and take care of the wildlife, that they're not going to have anything out there for the sport they so love. And to be able to shoot their guns at something that they're so proud of owning. Same thing with ducks and quail. We don't have quail because we don't have a habitat. We have worn ourselves out up here. But
I was up
those
there,
are kind of things that people they're pretty sharp dudes.
Do you know one thing? There's a little sign by the spring branch there at Big Springs in Van Buren that says, "Please don't put your hands in the water. It's going to hurt the ecosystem." What?
Yeah.
Well, I had a gentleman one time years ago out of Dallas, Texas, and we got to talking about capped oil wells in West Texas. He said it's one particular spot, there's 27 capped oil wells. I said, why? Because the EPA says there's a rare salamander running around those wells. I said, well, didn't God give that salamander the sense to know when there's danger? So if he comes up and smells something that doesn't smell like something he wants to eat, like it's crude oil that's spilled, then wouldn't he run the opposite direction? But yet we capped these oil wells based on protecting that salamander.
Well, they don't give credit to nature and the creator of nature to take care of itself. That's why I say if you're an avid fan of global warming and the climate change doctrine, you got to be a non-believer in the creator. Yeah. Because
what was that on Facebook today? Somebody says, would somebody call Al Gore and reignite the global warming? We're freezing here all the way down.
The Arctic Circle was supposed to be melted by now.
Yeah.
We're 10 years after he said that.
Uh-huh.
But when you go to make bold claims like that, there will be a time some of us remember what you said, and it's not true. So we knew it was a lie then, it's a lie, and it's proven now. But that's something that President Trump has done, and we were headed down a road, whether you like him or don't like him, was suspended the Waters of the USA rule because that was coming to North Arkansas and some parts of Central Arkansas because of the mussels and the salamanders.
Yeah.
And they were going to start taking over every little creek and mud puddle and maybe even the farm ponds, like in some western federal lands out west. They do that now. And suspending so many of these regulations, people wonder, well, what executive order has he given that has helped the common man? Well, how many regulations has he done away with that helps us? Go find the list and read down through them. And suspending the Water of USA rule helps the common man. It helps us locally. It would have been to the point where we couldn't grade a road next to a creek.
But it even got to the point where I was visiting with Congressman Rick Crawford, 1st Congressional District of Arkansas, where they wanted to regulate how much dust a farmer could actually stir up when playing a field in the spring.
Yes.
It's like, what?
And
next he wants to, how much dust will my vacuum cleaner stir when I do the carpet? You know?
You go back to the disaster of the BP oil spill in the Gulf that was going to be the ruination of the whole Gulf lands. How come we haven't heard anything in that for...
They cleaned it all up.
The salt water of the sea regenerated itself. It cleaned it up itself.
Yeah. Nature.
Nature.
Like
it regenerates. Yeah.
Like God? I think
God said things in order to take care of itself, protect itself.
If we listen more to God instead of the government, we'd be better off, Mickey.
Now, not saying that we're not supposed to keep our trash in the trash bag and not dump the oil out there in the ditch. There are things that we can do that we have been given responsibility to take care of.
Exactly.
But if we do our job, then he take care of the rest. I appreciate you letting me be in here today, and I hope Paul is in the Caribbean where he can enjoy a vacation. He's not going to enjoy one up here in Arkansas right now.
Well, I consider Paul Harrell to be the finest in Arkansas in conservative talk radio. And I'm sure that we may have said a few things that may have irritated a few people here or there, but we're throwing everything out, and let's agree to disagree. But Paul Harrell's the finest. We were in Little Rock one time at the invitation of David Crow, and they asked me to speak on some things. And I said, I was on the podium, I said, I think we got this backwards. I said, Paul Harrell's back there introducing me when it should be Paul Harrell up here speaking, and I should be introducing Paul Harrell. I think we got
Well, we encourage all y'all to tell him how good a job we did. Yeah. Disagree or disagree. We brought a lot of things up to the subject, things that we can't solve, but
things will be getting better with Paul, because starting Monday, the Paul Harrell program will be the Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell on 96.5 in Little Rock, and it'll be 6 to 8 a.m., so everybody in Central Arkansas gets a good drive time morning program. And they'll be on also in Jonesboro, Fort Smith, Rogers, Stuttgart, Russellville. And so quite an honor to be sitting in the Paul Harrell program chair. About 30 seconds, wrap it up, Mickey.
Well, I'll just say Happy New Year, everybody, and hope you eat your black-eyed peas and turnip greens and hog jowl yesterday like I did.
whole dish of
Oh, my wife fixed it up, and they said she was a keeper, and of course, for 44 years, I think that's true. But Happy New Year, and hope it's a prosperous year, and we look forward to continue to serve the public. And I am, for those that may be local, member of the County Judges Association. I have been appointed to the Legislative Committee, and so I'll be eager to hear your thoughts.
Wraps it up. Back tomorrow. Paul Harrell program tomorrow. Have a great evening, everybody.